The altcoin chart over here has recently been testing this line of support and is actually starting to break upwards, especially with the weekly chart having a MACD bullish crossover. Altcoins themselves this week have had massive price action towards the upside, showing a bit more of a risk on narrative. This war, it's never ending. Even though we're going to have these peace deals, there's going to be treaties, agreements. What's continuously happening is on one side, you have a radical group not willing to give up its leverage. And on the other side, you have a powerful group, America, that wants to get their own way. And what does that look like? The Strait of Trump. But I still believe, regardless of this war, whether staying on or not, will keep pushing the markets and prices up because other risk on indicators are showing us a completely different story. Here's what they have to show. The Russell 2000 definitively making highs and consistently showing their strength. And another reason why altcoins are showing so much strength, we have the Clarity Act coming up for markup in the legislative nature of America itself on May 14th. Lots of news and lots of information to cover today, but this is why the market moves regardless of the war. Hello everyone and welcome to Strategic Markets, your place for technical and fundamental analysis all at once. And today, to start off on our news events is, well, look, this Middle East conflict. US awaits response from Iran on proposal to end war. I've actually been doing some research over the week, and honestly speaking, I don't think this war is going to end. We have one radical group on one side that has their religious beliefs, and they are willing to go down with that. They're not willing to take a loss or lose their rights to nuclear enrichment. On the other side, we have a powerful entity known as America, who don't want to lose their war because they started this war on the basis of logistics and finance. And that particular finance aspect looks like the Strait of Trump. Known as Strait of Hormuz, Trump wants to make it his own so he can then negotiate logistics with countries that operate on this particular strait and be able to squeeze them for better logistical war. That's where I see this particularly happening. And this was actually pointed to us just on the 29th of April, a couple of days ago. It just took me a bit of a while. So to be honest, and we're sorry about this, I personally am not going to be using hook lines to say this PC is going to move the markets up because I personally don't think that the war ends. But that's not a bad thing as well, because although this war might not be ending, that doesn't mean that the Strait of Hormuz doesn't open up and drop prices in oil anytime soon. At least that is what I speculate. Because recently, I don't know if you've done research on this, but do have a look at a couple of videos. The US sent in 2 Navy destroyers to transit to the Strait of Hormuz as a bit of a test and as a bit of a way to be able to move other ships on the Strait of Hormuz as well. What they actually did was they used these 2 destroyers as bait to basically for Iran to fire upon these particular ships. When Iran fired, America used their satellite technology, their AI systems, and their radar systems to track down the last amount of assets that Iran had and where they were coming from. These speedboats, these little minesweepers, and these ground-to-water missiles positioned across the mountains. And they basically took out majority of Iran's assets to be able to secure the Strait of Hormuz. And as Iran gets weaker on the Strait of Hormuz to be able to secure it, America can open it up for its own gain and maybe even charge tariffs to the ships that go through there or basically be able to negotiate that as their own power. Considering they can't control the Panama Canal and other different times like the Strait of Malacca and whatnot, America knew that they wanted this war with Iran, but also to have this financial choke point for their own power. Now, where does my basis come for as to where the market's seeing this on a future indicator? Something very peculiar happened this week. The altcoins chart actually bounced off this particular support, this multi-year support, and is making its move upwards. We actually are currently on the verge of crossing this 200-week SMA, and this is where you really have to be looking, guys. Because recently on the weekly, if we have a look over here on the bottom right, you can see that we had a MACD bullish crossover and we bounced off this particular supporting square or box, you might call it, and we are actually making our way up. So that's showing strength. And when you actually visualize this in the altcoin section, we can very clearly see that some of the biggest names You've got your ONDO altcoin, which is basically tokenizing securities in the stock market. You've got TON, which is a Telegram optionality for association with an altcoin. You got ICP, Internet Computer Protocol. You got Render, which is providing graphic compute power in the altcoin sector. All of these altcoins made massive moves over the last particular week. That's because sentiment is changing in the market and people are now starting to go risk on even with altcoins. That's why a big candle like this has popped up this particular week as news came out that the Clarity Act markup is going on the May 14th. And this is very interesting news because this is crypto's push in legislation to America saying give clarity to the assets of crypto. Now, if this gets passed into vote on May 14, this will be a very big deal. And one of the things that I actually say towards this particular thing is that when you have a look at Bitcoin, as I've been analyzing for a little bit, it's actually broken out of this particular bear flag, broken above it, going to 83K. Now it's touching the 80K point for support before it continues its move into wherever it decides to go. Now, I personally am bullish on Bitcoin. I was bullish short term as well, and it kept doing its move. Medium to long term, I'm still bullish, but I personally think that this Clarity Act markup date of May the 14th, obviously I'm not a financial advisor and this is not financial advice, but this could be a sell the news event. And why I say that is because even though Bitcoin has broken out of this bearish flag pattern and now is going upwards, on the liquidation heat map though, if you see in terms of short squeezes, we don't have a lot of liquidity over here, guys. But if we see on the bottom side though, the liquidity is massive, which means that for the next couple of days, it's highly likely we can take out some more liquidity upstairs. We could set some new basic local highs. But to be honest, a sell the news event in crypto legislation is actually quite common, which is why I do see the price coming down to 76K and whatnot. And that's when the market starts panicking. That's where like, cool, we faked out. We basically have everyone in fear mode. That's where I actually see the real move happening. Now, if we do fear out and we keep going down from there, well, all the indicators we've been talking about, copper versus gold, the Russell 2000, whatnot, somehow disalign. And okay, we lose faith, and that's a really tough time to be alive. I wouldn't know much to comment there. But if my faith and if my analysis is correct, I personally believe that would be a shakeout, even up down to 74K, I believe is a shakeout for the last resort and making everyone panic before we either consolidate sideways or make our way back up.
This is a massive call from you, Yash. You are the biggest crypto bull that we know alive, basically. Is this just basically because this is all in alignment in relation to all of the other regulatory announcements that have come in the past?
Yeah, buy the rumor and sell the news is quite a common event in crypto. And generally, if the market is more risk on, and in these particular situations we've discussed it, copper versus gold is risk on. The ISM manufacturing index is currently risk on. So all these indicators are showing towards a bit more risk on territory. Even altcoins have started moving recently due to a little bit more of a risk on narrative. So if these are all supported, then I believe the market continues to move up and still has a bit of a shakeout to shake out any of the weak holders. But I want to prepare you guys for that particular move, likely before that even happens.
Okay.
Okay. And something that signals that risk on aspect very well is the Russell 2000. We can basically see that the Russell 2000 in what's called February of 2021, where it made its first definitive high and stayed over there before not making a definitive high at all. It took it about 57 months of sideways action before it definitively broke up. And I mean definitively, not just literally, but definitively broke up and went higher. Similarly, on the altcoins chart, we can see over here that we are currently, from the point perspective, 54 months. So it's at similar 4.5 years. And if Russell recently has signaled that it's going to break out and move above its prior highs, I want to say that there's a little bit of correlation between the Russell and the altcoin signaling that we could be having a bit of a move over here. As long as the risk on narrative is supported, copper versus gold and the ISM continues to perform as well. And on that particular topic, oil plays an important factor because oil is that inflationary impact that we can consistently have that's making prices harder for the common person. And over here, we talked about this, always making higher highs, RSI was making higher lows, oil is now going down lower to $104. Now, if America has the capability to open up the Strait of Hormuz over this particular week or the next couple of weeks and is able to get more ships through it, then I see the price of oil going down even more, giving risk assets a way to go up. But for that, we just have to consistently just see that through. But you could just say that this is a bit of a double top formation going through right now, touch up, down, touch up, and we could be having our way down. But I need to see that play out. And if that happens, then for the risk on narrative, I'm full bull. I will get your analysis on that, Steve, and we will go from there.
Well, great. Thank you so much for that, Yash. And that was a really, really good, candid description of exactly what's going on in relation to cryptocurrencies as well as Brent crude. And we'll start with Brent crude this time around. You can see a lot of range-bound activity, upper 4-hour support resistance line there, as well as that lower band of the 4-hour support resistance line. And we are stuck smack bang between those right now. We've actually bounced off that lower bound right here over the last couple of days, being Wednesday and Thursday in particular. And we're now sitting right underneath the short-term moving average and just above the quarterly VWAP, or actually just beneath that quarterly VWAP, I should say. That's where we closed on Friday. In terms of lagging indicators, pretty much stuck in between the price range area there, and we are hanging right in between that Tenkan Sen area and the baseline. So we are fairly much range bound on all aspects. There is zero movement area in terms of where this is going. Not a problem. We wait for direction. The buyers are fairly much in control in terms of the yearly VWAP. That's that green line. So it's still a bullish trend in the grand scheme of things from the year. But in relation to the quarterly VWAP, being that purple line, the sellers are just in control in relation to that. So it's a bit of a mix-up as to exactly what's going on there. USO, it's a little bit more profound in terms of the buyers. At quarterly VWAP, the buyers are in control up there. The buyers are still in control in relation to the yearly. So a lot more is going on in relation to US oil, but short-term moving averages, the actual price range is beneath that. Lower highs and lower lows, though, on the lagging indicator from the Ichimoku. So we're getting a few mixed signals in relation to this area here. But as we've also discussed over the last couple of videos as well, the open interest in relation to the contracts that are going on when it comes to, say, looking out towards June and July, there's still a lot of interest in relation to, say, 140 strike prices, the 150 strike prices, all the way through up to about the 200 strikes. So I totally agree with you, Yash, in relation to the fact that this war is really going to be keeping on going on for quite some time, without a doubt. When it comes to, say, looking at cryptocurrencies, we have a look over at Bitcoin. Let's start over with that. Things are looking fairly reasonable on the Bitcoin stage. We've actually come down and tested these short-term moving averages, and we've done that successfully this week. That's the yellow line in terms of the 8-day EMA. Things are looking reasonably positive. We had a successful test to the downside when it comes to the 200-day moving average. Okay, well, that's not a great thing in terms of, say, like pushing in the upward direction. All right, well, we have to take that into consideration. But when we take a look at the Ichimoku curve, we're still forming higher highs and higher lows. So there's a positive aspect in that. That Tenkan Sen is that blue line. That's a trend line. We're still making higher highs and higher lows there. Overall, that and the baseline still actually looking quite positive. The real negative catalyst, though, has got to be Ethereum. We're really stuck here. This is just basically doing nada, absolutely nothing overall. I'm going to enlarge this chart over here on the side. This is our moving averages. You can really see everything's constrained. Okay, look, it's above the short-term moving averages. It's bounced off the VWAP. Everything's looking pretty positive in terms of the way things are going there, but we're really stuck beneath all of these resistance areas. It can't seem to make its way above it. Now, I might be laughing away at this, but it's just like it's trying its best to get past all of these resistance lines, but look at it every single time. Bonk, 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 bonk. It's just hitting its head, and it's it kind of reminds me of one of those whack-a-mole things. It's just like bang, 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 and it just can't seem to get past anything.
No, I can't.
It really is struggling. And the lagging indicator doing exactly the same thing as well too. It's just bouncing, 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 and it's just not having any fun whatsoever. But let's have a look at some positive. We've got the Tenkan Sen being that blue line. it is actually crossing above the baseline, being that red line. It's trying to actually make its way above a resistance line. Whether or not the price action will follow its way through and be able to actually break above this, maybe. But these are the kind of things you've got to try and actually see before you're actually going to have some form of confirmation to actually get the price action above those areas. So if you'd actually see any positivity in terms of Ethereum as well as your altcoins really pushing up, you would need to see all this price action get above these resistance areas to begin with, and then you've got to contend with all of these other resistance areas as well that are also forming here, because it's going to have to bounce through all of that and then get past this 150-day moving average as well, which is still declining. Another positive aspect, not too sure whether you'll see whether anyone's really been seeing this or not as well too, this is the chart of the day. WGMI. Not too sure whether you know about this one, mate.
No.
CoinShares Bitcoin mining ETF. Now you might be looking at me and going, what the heck is this? This is a composite of a whole range of different companies that relate to Bitcoin mining. A very impressive chart in recent times. As you can see, look at it. It's bounced right off short-term moving averages and really, really respected and bounced right through the VWAP and all of these other moving averages as well. The lagging indicator, higher highs, higher lows, everything's fantastic. Really, really respecting quite nicely in terms of that Tenkan Sen as well as the baseline area and everything there. Very, very impressive chart. It's a composite of many, many companies in relation to Bitcoin mining. Three of the biggest being Cipher Digital, as you can see, a very, very productive and constructive chart there as well. Iron Limited as well. Same thing. You can see actually very, very constructive, looking very similar to the WGMI overall. This is actually an Australian company, believe it or not, but actually now dual listed over in America, and also TeraWolf. So all of these companies, and it also has other companies as well like Mara and Hut 8. So these kind of companies all form that composite of WGMI. This is, I suppose, something in terms of another bright spot, if you want to look at it that way, towards something to do with cryptocurrencies. So definitely something to keep an eye on. What I would suggest is be very cautious with this, though, considering how far away these are now in terms of overextension from the short-term moving average. Whether these will come back down, fill the gap, all of those kind of concepts that we normally look at in terms of technical analysis, or whether or not we'll actually have a gap continuation and then it'll just shoot way outwards. But be very, very cautious in terms of overextension. But keep an eye on something like this in combination with the movements along the lines with Bitcoin and Ethereum, especially with the Clarity Act being announced in relation to May the 14th, especially with what you were talking about before in terms of buy the rumor, sell the news. This kind of chart here in particular could be extremely important in relation to that. Another thing we talked about a while ago was the banking index. Remember this? Hasn't been performing all that great in terms of the banking index as well as the financial index in general overall. We're actually getting a lot of weakness in terms of this, especially in relation to the short-term moving averages. Keep an eye on the test of the 100-day moving average being this white line here. Should we get a failure of this white line overall here, the whole banking index overall, especially over in the United States, maybe even here in Australia as well, could really be under pressure. So another thing to keep an eye on overall there as well. Now, if we take a look at our old friend the Russell in particular, all-time highs again this week, looking very good in terms of the lagging indicator overall there as well, especially in terms of the trend line with the Tenkan Sen and the short-term moving averages. Hasn't overextended too far, so there could still be some more room for some extra movement up above. And obviously, you know the correlation in relation to the Russell, small caps, all those kind of things there as well. And you've been talking about that, especially in relation to cryptocurrencies there as well. Now, the Russell has been doing quite well alongside the SPY, top 500 stocks in the United States, moving along very, very nicely. Whether or not we're overextended from those short-term moving averages, that's a possibility. Likewise with the Qs. Technology's been doing exceptionally well. But one thing to really keep in mind, though, technology in terms of, say, the XLK being the major sector of technology is probably one of the only sectors in the whole of the S&P that's actually performing well at the moment. I'll let you take a look at those in terms of the sectors overall in your own time. Have a look at all of the 11 sectors. Majority of the other sectors are not performing all that great. XLK, though, being technology, is performing very, very well. We can't have just one sector, though, of the entire S&P doing really, really well whilst everything else is lagging. And that in itself is being reflected in general in relation to the Dow Jones. Dow Jones, top 30 stocks in the US, is not forming all-time highs along with the other three major indices. And this is Dow theory in action. We would want all four of these going up in unison. We're not seeing that. So be cautious in relation to that, as well as taking a look at all of the major indexes, or the major sectors, I should say, because that's not happening overall there too. And also the same situation applies here to Dow Jones Transportation Average, which is not forming all-time highs either, along with those other major indices. That's another major component of Dow theory, which is not actually aligning very, very nicely at all either. But we do have a little bit of a bright spot in terms of the fact that bonds have actually started improving a little bit, even though they haven't really gotten up above the quarterly VWAP, which is something that's still a little bit of a concern. We want a little bit more strength here in the bonds, being a large component of the overall markets, but at least it's better than being below the September lows, which it actually did actually get below at the beginning of the week. Yields have actually come down a little bit, which is actually a good thing, considering that yields put pressure on the Russell, for instance. You don't want too much pressure on the Russell if you want the overall markets to be going well. The dollar has actually been weakening. We don't want the dollar weakening too much, though. Okay, so we want a nice fine balance. It's probably the best way of looking at things overall. And volatility hasn't been increasing dramatically, but you don't want volatility to be going too low either. You want it to be a nice, decent balance there as well in the general scheme of things. We take a look at gold. Gold seems to be improving, which is interesting. We're back above the quarterly VWAP there, as you can see, and above the short-term moving averages too. It bounced quite nicely off the 150-day moving average. The interesting one, though, is silver. Look at this. We've actually bounced off all of these major moving averages, and we're actually now above the 100-day moving average as well, being that white line. So silver has really taken on the mantle in terms of relative strength, much greater now than gold. So that's actually really, really reversed the trend that we've been seeing probably over the last few months, in where gold was actually a much, much stronger relative strength compared to silver. It really comes down to your own individual positions and really keeping an eye in terms of your own risk levels and keeping an eye on those levels. But really having a look in terms of, say, what Bitcoin might be doing, and a lot of the cryptocurrencies, really still constrained in terms of exactly what's happening there as well too, and whether or not we're actually going to be seeing the breakouts above those resistance areas, and whether or not we're actually going to see any follow through once those breakouts actually do occur there as well. Keep an eye, particularly in relation to those indices. Will the actual growth continue, especially keeping an eye on the mere fact as well, there seem to be only certain sectors that are actually growing, particularly in terms of technology. The other sectors are really pulling things back a little bit overall there as well. With that, mate, I'm going to hand it right back to you.
Technology sectors. Well, that correlates a lot to the AI boom we've been discussing with this particular narrative. I personally, when we talk about Bitcoin, I'm looking for the 84K zone. Once we break out of that, I am fairly confident bullish that newer local highs would come in reasonably quick. Until that, the 8K line holds the short-term holders average as well as the 200-day MA. We might discuss more on that over the upcoming week's videos.
Absolutely.
But with that being said, thank you for tuning in this time. You're seeing a lot of signals, altcoins, copper versus gold, and if you're enjoying our analysis, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe as well. We would love for you to join the journey. I would love for you to write this particular word in the comments if you are up till here with us now. Today's word is altcoins. So drop that into the comment if you've kept along. Thank you, Mark, as well, for always commenting. We appreciate you. But with that being said, everyone have a good day. We will catch you on the next one.